Even just recently, I would say 3 months ago, I improved my straight foot lock out of sight just with a few gripping things. This all goes to Jason Rao. He's the man when it comes to mechanics, and there's a few things here that he changed that really make a big difference. Tight. Now today's session is going to be a little different to normal. What we're going to do is, because we've got, some new people and we've got some people who have been around a bit, but we haven't touched on these things. So we're going to do a little bit of a lesson or masterclass just on braking mechanics. And I'm not going to stick on one single position. So for instance, not just inside heel hook the whole lesson. I'm going to spread it across the more common leg entanglements. So we're not going to go too deep into each one, but we're going to give you guys just a little bit of a feeling on what should you be doing to actually finish each of these moves. So we'll probably look at the straight foot lock, we'll look at an inside heel hook, an outside heel hook, and knee bar, and then we'll see how we go for time. So that's how we're going to work today. A little bit different to normal. UFC, are you right for me to use you? Yeah. Have you got a good leg?
I've got one good leg.
Okay, which one is it?
Oh, that one.
This one? Yeah. Okay, cool. Go set it here for me. So gather to a position so you can see. If you're behind me, you might want to move around in front a little bit more. Right, so this is going to be our positioning. We're not going to go into entries into the positions. We're just going to go on the mechanics of how do I actually finish the position? How do I break this guy's foot in this case? Even just recently, I would say 3 months ago, I improved my straight foot lock out of sight just with a few gripping things. This all goes to Jason Rao. He's the man when it comes to mechanics, and there's a few things here that he changed that really make a big difference. So let's get this through first. The finish is definitely not just driving your forearm into the back of your partner's Achilles. And the finish is not just pulling their toes directly back away from the knee, which is what I used to do. The finish is somewhere between the two where I actually start to internally rotate the heel and externally rotate the foot. So I'm actually not just doing this, I'm kind of doing this to him when I go for the break. Now understand, with the straight foot lock, you don't have to have a knee line. So you can finish a straight foot lock being below with no knee line whatsoever. So this is pretty cool, this is a good thing, but you have to control above the joint you're breaking. So I need to control either here or I need to control the hip. I can't have no control because he can just move his body to relieve pressure. He can lift his hip up or do whatever he wants. So let's just look at this. The grip that I want is I'm going to bring my elbow in and I'm going to seat his foot in a very particular position. The guys who are good at this, they don't just let the leg flop anywhere. If it goes too much inside, the leg gets slipped. And if it's too deep and the guy's just booting and you're just trying to break his leg in half here, you're not actually working on the joint. So what we've got to get good at is this idea of picking up where you catch the heel where it's just pushing into your floating rib. So I'm pushing it inwards like this with my elbow. And then I'm going to use my palm around here on the inside of his leg and control this so he can't rotate. And then I'm going to take my second hand and just lock up on my forearm and just pull my elbows in together. And then the mechanic of the finish, I keep my hands as high as I can, so I don't let them fall down and arch away. I keep them as high as I can, but the mechanic is leaning, see I'm leaning outward slightly, which is pulling his toes away with my armpit, and then I'm slightly lifting the heel via my forearm inwards. So when I start to go into the break, this starts to happen. Now if I pair that with some type of control, let's say the control is a post Ashy where I'm posting on the hip. Now as I start to go into the break, you get serious pressure across the joint. Okay, so you're going to play around with your partner, you're going to practice getting this pick up and what it feels like. So first of all, you're going to get this, and your partner might tap here, but he might not. You haven't got control over the joint, you haven't got like a push-pull sort of force going on. But I want you to get used to being able to pick this up. Then from here, move yourself into some type of braking position. You could also lock below here. When I start to go into the break here, very powerful. I control the hip here like this, same mechanic, very powerful. So pretty basic stuff, but if you can improve your braking mechanics, then it's just a matter of getting yourself in the positions. Get a partner, let's go with this. Right, so the straight foot lock's pretty cool. Now, let's think about this. Can you do the straight foot lock across the body? So just then, we did the straight foot lock in a position like this. Can we do the foot lock across here? Well, you can, right? So this would be a 50-50 position. It's slightly more difficult, but this is kind of like the next meta coming through is this crossbody straight foot lock, or Woj lock is I think the name it's been given. Wojciech's been just murdering with this thing. And it's probably the most devastating. So let's have a look. The mechanic's slightly different on this one because we've inverted the position of the foot. Here, the foot was on this side, and now it's completely on the opposite side there. So we're not doing that mechanic where I'm pinching the heel inwards and the toes out, we're kind of doing the opposite. It's like the toes out and the heel in. Sorry, it's like the toes in and the heel out, I suppose. All right, that's great. Yeah. So it's a different mechanic here, and we're going to brake on so the foot's on the high side. You can get it over here, all right? You can get it from over here, but the best case scenario is braking over here, where we start to get into positions like this. Okay, so it's a weird one. This will be a lot more, I feel like, on like the ATFL on the outside of the foot, rather than maybe on the inside of the foot like the last one. My lat is pulling the toes here, and my grip is driving the heel upwards. And what I do with my lat, rather than just driving through it, I crunch backwards, and it causes this sort of motion. So you get guys getting foots like pretty badly broken. So what I need to do is set the heel quite sort of relaxed here. If you have it very high and tight, it actually doesn't work as well. So that the heel gets slipped inwards slightly here. You end up in this position. So his heel's down here, and this takes a bit to get used to the sensitivity. My heel's down here, his heel's on my ribs, and then my armpit is catching his toes up high here. I'm gonna lock my legs just in a position on the outside of his hips. So we're in a 50-50. And you can even just work from a propped hand and an open hand. You don't even need to have joined hands here. But the mechanic is this. Look, I start to, nearly like I was turning my back to him as I start to drive through the side of the foot here. If I pair it with a grip, this can work as well. So I can start to do this. These both work. This is a bit trickier. So if you're still new to the foot locking stuff, you can just keep practicing what we were doing before on the straight foot lock. All right, look at the mechanic, it's slightly different here. But the crossbody foot lock is nasty. Let's give it a go. Let's go to outside heel hooking. Now, we're not going through entries. Our partner's not giving us huge resistance in regards to heel exposure. So getting heel exposure is probably the most difficult thing you can do in an outside heel hook. Once you get the heel exposure, if you got everything else in line, the brake is, I think against someone good, it's harder to expose their heel than it is just to get the brake. Let's put it that way. If you could start with the braking position on good guys, you're still going to give them damage a lot of the time. So let's see. What we're attacking here, it does put pressure through the foot, and you will break people's feet with outside heel hooks depending on your gripping. What we're also doing is pushing out through the side of the LCL. So we're driving through the side of his hip, and we're busting the ligaments in there and some other ones sometimes as well. Now, the idea with a heel hook is that we're creating rotational force on the lower leg. And that's what the heel hook grip is about causing rotational force by lifting the heel here. And if I lift his heel, you'll see UFC's knee will start to fall down. So what we need to do is pair some type of wedge and force against the inside of the knee. So as the heel lifts, and then I provide force through the side of the knee, now we get a heel hook, okay? So that's all we're effectively doing here. So let's see, nice basic heel hook. I'm gonna take a shotgun grip like this. A shotgun grip is like you're holding a shotgun under your arm. So I'm cupping his calf, I've got my fingers around here on my rib line, and I set his heel at about the end of my elbow here, roughly. If you set your elbow too far back, you tend to get a lot of slippage of toes and things like that. And if you're too deep, when you try to dig, you're still on the tibia. So we pull the knee to a position where it's pointing at the ceiling or slightly inwards. And then from here, I want to have the foot very high. So where his little pinky toe is right up very high in my armpit, and I'm lifting everything, and I put this barrier under his heel of my forearm. Just tell yourself like you were looking at a wristwatch, like this. So my hand's facing down. My second hand comes in and locks underneath. A common mistake is we see poor gripping from people, just haphazardly gripping, and it's easy for him to slip his heel off my forearm. So what we want to do here is we want to lift, and then we bolster this with the second hand. So that's what we're doing here. There is other grips, we're just doing this for now. I lock my legs, and you can even just lock a triangle. This is fine. All I want to be able to do now is one, wedge his knee in position, so that his knee, when I lift the heel slightly, and it's very slight, you might not even see it, but just lifting the heel towards my chin, so my chin and his heel are close, puts torque into the side of his knee. He would like to internally rotate his knee, and there'll be no pressure on his knee. But if I can marry the external force with the lifting force, now we're starting to get to braking pressure, and he'll feel it in his ankle, and if you do a good job, he'll feel it through his knee. If you reef on his ankle too much, your partner might tap, but they'll probably tap because their foot's getting bent. If you can marry the heel hooking force with the force of the heel, now you're going to get pressure, and this is how you're going to break someone where they can't compete anymore. You just rip their ankle. Sometimes they can continue going depending on how bad the break is on the ankle. All right, let's give it a go. Outside heel hook. So that's outside heel hook. Now, inside heel hook. We better do it the other way. That's the one. So the inside heel hook. Now, a lot of people like inside heel hooks more. The reason they like them more is I think they're a little easier. Your mechanics don't have to be as good to get a break. We've often said this, that just anatomically, the way the hips work and the ankle works, it's easier to break with an inside heel hook than an outside heel hook. So if you think about that, this next one should be a little easier for you. Same idea, toes go in the armpit, except it's the big toe this time, and we're lifting the heel in the same way. Now I watched some people demonstrating their heel hook before, and they were allowing their partner's leg to go very straight, and they were turning their hips like this. So you've now ventured into hip positioning we would call more like a knee bar position. You just don't have a grip in a traditional knee bar grip. But this here, when you try to heel hook this guy, it doesn't really work because of the way you're doing it, you're hyperextending the knee. And you can also lose the knee in this case. So just remember, for a heel hook, I actually want a certain amount of bend in the leg. An optimal bend is something like this. I would say all the way bent is not great and all the way straight is not great, even though you can still get breaks. A bend like this would be good, and I'm setting my knee here, and then I'm back heeling with my legs. So your ashigarami becomes important for keeping your groin set in the position you want. So in this position, it's set on the outside of his knee, so I'm gonna be busting the inside ligaments and the inside of the ankle. So from here, you don't have to be anywhere near as good as before. We can even lean over and start to put the heel down towards the mat slightly, but what I don't wanna do is allow him to take his knee towards the mat. So I want you to sort of think about the idea of not being lazy with your knees, particular inside knee, and as you lean here, he turns his knee in as well, because even if you've got the heel here, I've seen plenty of matches lately where because his knee's so inwardly turned here, they don't get a break, and people are like shocked. They're like, how is that guy not getting his leg broken? And it's just that the knee is not in a position to actually break it. So I want his knee kind of pointing up to the ceiling here like this, so I'm gonna keep this knee wedged on the inside of the knee to some degree. So if UFC tries to slip it, it's harder for him. And now I am going to provide some sort of external force, because if I just turn everything this way, it goes against, I'm just pulling one direction. A heel hook's got to twist the leg. So I'm lifting here, I'm keeping this from allowing him to slip his knee, and then I very slightly start to turn my knees downwards. So I'm just adducting my knees as I lift the heel, and then I start to go into breaking from here. Now, if you feel like that's not working for you and you're a beginner with this, you could like a triangle here, but it's definitely not as good. I'm gonna say foot to foot and pinching knees, coming up here onto your side, and then starting to drive your hips through is what we wanna try and do here. All right, don't overlift the heel, but if you don't put any lift in the heel, you're gonna have to put a lot more hip in. So I lift the heel slightly as I drive my hips in. Really slowly on your mechanics, guys. There's nothing scarier than having a training partner who's like jerky with his movements because he's kind of like learning. You will hurt people if you might not even mean to. So just be nice and controlled. So like I'm doing here, I've caught his heel, I'm lifting the heel slightly, and then I'm slowly going through until he gets to a break. And he's more experienced, so he kind of allows his leg to go into a fairly deep position on the break. I would suggest don't wait until you're feeling hot pain in the side of your knee. That's probably too far. All right, but don't just tap as soon as they get your heel. Start to like, when you feel the pressure build through your ankle and into the side of the knee, then you're gonna stop. Let's go. So far we've covered the straight foot lock, both on a straight and a cross ashi variation. Then we looked at the outside heel hook and the inside heel hook. Now let's go to the knee bar, which is a common attack. And here's the way I see the knee bar. If you have a guy who's got bendy legs and feet and you're trying to tap him with straight foot locks and it's not working and he's turning out of heel hooks, you put them in a knee bar. If they refuse to tap the knee bars, it doesn't matter how tough they are, they're gonna take damage. They're just gonna take damage. So they can have bendy hips and ankles and maybe they're eating heel hooks where other guys wouldn't be able to. You extend their leg, you hyperextend their leg just like you would an arm bar past the range where it can go. The leg just doesn't like that, even if they're bendy. Like we saw, probably one of the better examples of this is maybe Tide Ruotolo versus Paulo Miyao, I think it was, at ADCC in 2017 or 19. And he sent a knee bar on him that he didn't tap to, but his knee was destroyed for a long period of time after that. So knee bars are very effective if you've got a guy who's dealing with all the foot locking stuff. If they've got super Gumby ankles and super Gumby hips, they can be difficult to deal with. Because now I'm just hyperextending his legs. So even if they've got flexible legs, it's only so far it can go before it starts to break against the joint here. So let's keep it nice and simple. When I knee bar somebody, whereas on the outside heel hook, we're putting our hips on the inside of the knee, and then on the inside heel hook, we're putting our hips on the outside of the knee. We're now going to put our hips on the top of the knee. So I've always used this analogy, which I think works well for people, is each leg lock kind of has a certain hip positioning. If you think about the straight foot lock, my hip positioning was underneath. So if we just made his knee into a box, each side of that box has like a certain positioning of my hips. If my hips are, which is a good one, this one? If my hips are underneath, I'm in a position where I can straight foot lock this guy, but I can't knee bar him because I would need my hips on the top of the box for that to work. If I want to heel hook him, it wouldn't work my hips being here. But if I wanted to outside heel hook him, I would put my hips square with the inside of that box. If I wanted to inside heel hook him, my hips would have to be on the outside of the box. So if that analogy makes sense to you, I think that's pretty useful. This idea that there's going to be 4 hip positionings you're mainly going to use, and it's going to lead you down a path of a certain leg lock. So for a knee bar, I want my hips on the front side here. So ideally with knee bars, we always want to control the second leg, but for now we'll just work on single leg control to keep it simple for you guys. Just turn on your side for me. So yeah, we're going to operate from here. So you notice now my hips are facing directly into the kneecap. Now if I'm below the kneecap, I'm not actually affecting the joint. So this will happen to people where they try to knee bar and you've got the knee out of the joint, you're not extending their knee, you're just pulling on their lower leg. If you go too high, it can sometimes be hard to get pressure on the brake here. So you've got to get used to setting that kneecap basically right on your hip that you're going to brake him on, okay? Ideally, I always brake him on the high side. So what I mean by that is when I'm on my side here, the high side is where the foot is as opposed to the low side. So my right hip bone is where I'm sitting his kneecap right now. And I'm just going to lock a triangle for here. There's different leg positioning you can take. Now for knee bars, you can go with grips in front where I'm pulling like we would kind of like on an arm bar, but definitely the best I would say is where we switch and we put his leg under our armpit and we grab our hamstring. We call this a lat grip because now it's a lat knee bar. So from here now, I pull down, so I've got this bar across the back of his leg, so that's going to give me a pulling down force, and then my hips drive upwards for an upwards force. So what I do here, I pinch this elbow back, I lock in at my hamstring, and then I start to drive with my hips. And he's going to feel his legs start to extend. Don't run them too deep, but it's a bit like an arm bar. You'll feel tension through, and then it gets to a point where the joint starts to take the load. Now, where knee bars fail is people misalign. So if he misaligned on me like this, I'm now going through the side of the leg, and it's actually hard to break him through here. So now you would think to yourself, okay, my hips are on the inside, I would have to switch to some other type of leg entanglement that suited, leg lock that suited that. For instance, it would be an outside heel hook in this case. So if my hips were to stay here, outside heel hook. If he goes all the way till he goes to the ceiling, now my hips are in the bottom of the joint. So now I've got to think, okay, what could I have on here? Well, I could do the crossbody straight foot lock in this case. If the foot passed to the other side, I could do a straight foot lock. So you get the idea of depending where his hips goes. So we're going to keep it pretty simple though and just do the knee bar, and your partner's not going to give you too much of a hard time. We're going to practice setting his kneecap right on our hip. So you can feel where your hip bone is. That's where I want you to set it. Don't set it across your testicles, it won't be nice. I lock up like so. I pummel to the inside here and grab the hamstring. I pull down and I drive up until my partner taps. Let's give it a go.